I'm Cheryl Lilla. I'm the president of the Quarry Community Association. And on behalf of the QCA Board of Directors, Joe Boudreau, Vice President, Chip Harrington, Secretary, Jerry Solomon, Treasurer, and Steve Brown, Director, we thank you for your attendance this evening. We would also like to welcome the Heritage Bay Community Association Board of Directors, who I believe are here this evening, as well as representatives from the commercial property owners. It's called Commercial Real Estate Consultants Incorporated, or CRE, who are with us this evening. Adam Radler, our QCA General Manager, as well as the attendees from the county. And last but not least, we would also like to thank Bob Radens, the General Manager of the Quarry Golf Club, who is a valued member of our team on the issue of Limestone Trail and who allowed us to use the golf club facility this evening. I'd like to take just a few moments to explain why we are here this evening concerning Limestone Trail. In approximately October-November timeframe of 2017, I was contacted by Tom Carolla from the commercial real estate property developers out front, who informed me of the county's decision to place a traffic signal at the Quarry Drive, Woodcrest Drive, and Lockley Road intersection, and that the county had denied CRE's request for a traffic signal at Bel Air Bay Drive and Lockley Road, which is where the racetrack gas station is at. And according to Mr. Carolla, the county directed CRE, their company, to have a traffic study performed, and CRE moved forward in this regard. So when Tom contacted me, he wanted to share the results of that traffic study. And that traffic study showed that without a traffic signal at Bel Air Bay Drive, that 35% of the commercial property traffic would use Limestone Trail. Obviously, this is a major concern for the Quarry Community Association, as Limestone Trail is a private road owned by our association. Chip Harrington, our QCA board member, Adam Radler, our QCA general manager, and myself met with CRE representatives to discuss further, and then invited Bob Radens from Golf and Mike Chapello, the Quarry Golf Board president, to our team to meet with county officials. The first meeting with the county was held on February 12th with members of the team and Bert Saunders, who is sitting here to my right, our county commissioner for District 3. Mr. Saunders understood our concern but stated that we really needed to meet with the deputy county manager, Mr. Nick Casalanguida, and Mr. Saunders was instrumental in scheduling that meeting, which took place on March 8th. At that meeting, Chip Harrington and I expressed significant concern to the deputy county manager and his staff regarding their plans to allow public traffic on our private road, Limestone Trail, and to allow the type of vehicles that could be expected to use our road coming out of the commercial property type of businesses. The fact that the QCA is the owner of the road, has maintenance, insurance, and liability responsibilities, which would likely escalate as a result of increased traffic, was another concern expressed. Also, that the county would need to take measures to address the many issues that we discussed, and we talked about many other concerns. Despite the county expressing their desire to work together, they were not too receptive to any of our ideas for how we could do so at the meeting on March 8th. I'm hoping that this evening we may have better news. They did, however, offer to conduct the town hall this evening, which was very thoughtful and kind of them. We appreciate that very much. Pardon? Brave. So that they could present their position on the issues and allow for a Q&A dialogue. Before turning the meeting to the county, I would like to remind all attendees this evening that while all of us have considerable passion and emotion over Limestone Trail, we must maintain meeting decorum and be respectful and professional in our conduct. When we get to the Q&A portion of the meeting, you will be limited to a maximum of 2 minutes in order to allow for a maximum number of people to express their questions and comments. I also request at this time for everyone to ensure that their cell phones are either turned off or in the vibrate quiet mode. We ask that you hold your questions until the end of the county's presentation so that they can talk through their presentation without interruption. And then when the county is finished with their presentation and opens up for questions and answers, and comments. We have a table that I believe Adam and Glenn have set up in the back of the room there with a separate microphone. We would ask that you go to that table in an orderly fashion to ask your questions. So again, thank you for your interest and attendance at this evening's town hall meeting. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to the Deputy County Manager, or excuse me, to Mr. Bert Saunders, our District County Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. This has to be kind of the largest crowd that I've seen since the football playoffs. So you're all to be commended. I know how busy everybody is. I know how difficult it is to make time for these types of meetings. I will tell you, I was on the county commission a long time ago. And after being off the commission for many years, I decided to come back because I felt that I could help out with some of the big issues that we're facing in the county. And one of the things that I have found since my return is that we have a very good county staff. Nick Castellanguida, and he'll be introducing everybody that's with him there. I'll let him do that. I will tell you, I have been very impressed with their willingness to listen, their willingness to come to meetings like this, to hear your concerns. I will also tell you that I believe we have a very good county commission that is willing to listen. And so what I hope happens tonight, I hope to learn a lot about what the issues are and what your concerns are. I truly believe we will be able to find an accommodation to satisfy your concerns. And so I'm here to listen. And with that, I want to turn this over to Nick. Again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this to you this evening.
Good evening, everybody. I want to point out there are two officers in back with guns, and I know what the answer is. We're very grateful you had us, and I can tell the Commissioner and your leadership team, anytime there's an opportunity to come out and work with you, we do work for you, and we're a professional organization. We're here to listen and figure out ways to help you as much as we can. I've been here since 2004, saw the tremendous growth in 2008, witnessed the recession, and here we are again. We are the #1 community for health and wellness. We score high every year with the tourism beach numbers. It's no wonder we're growing at approximately 2% a year. Our population right now is about 365,000 permanent. We had about 70,000 more in season. And at build-out, Collier County is expected to be approximately 1 to 1.2 million people. It's a lot of people that are still coming to Collier County. Most of that growth is to your east. In the rural lands area, there's a lot of big projects that are already cooking, coming through the board approval process. As Commissioner Saunders pointed out, he was on the board before. He worked at the state level. The state growth management laws kind of couple of ways. They protect the rights to a certain extent, but they protect land rights as well too. So if an owner has property, he has the right to develop. What we try to do is responsibly plan for that. And that is a challenge because there's a lot of yin and yang that goes with land development planning and land development entitlement process. So we have a team here in the various aspects. I'll introduce them. I'll talk a little bit about what they're going to talk to you tonight about, and then we'll do Q&A as we talked about. First, I'll introduce Mr. Mark Strain, if you can stand up. Mr. Strain is our Chief Hearing Officer and the Chairman of the Planning Commission. He's not a county employee. He's actually a contract employee that reports directly to the Board of County Commissioners. He has been on the Planning Commission since prior to the approval of this Heritage Bay development. I met Mark in 2004. We used to figure together at the Planning Commission. I used to present projects in front of him. We still do. He holds staff accountable. He does what's fair for the community, and he makes presentations. Under our special act that we created, the local planning agency makes a recommendation to the board for all zoning and land use applications. So in his capacity, I think he has the most history. He will present the history of Heritage Bay and development in this area and some of the projects that are coming online. So you get a feel for how your community. When we call Heritage Bay, we think of the bigger process. I know you see it as the Accordion Heritage Bay, but when it was approved in front of the board, it was called one project, and you'll hear more about that. Also with us is Thaddeus Cohen. He is the Growth Management Department Head. He took the job I took when I came here. He comes from a background, he's the Department of Community Affairs at the state level. He was the Secretary for Growth Management, worked all around the state. We also have Trini Scott, Planning Manager, Transportation Planning. She's took one of the jobs I had as well too. She's doing all the transportation planning that's here. and Anthony Kawaja, a professional engineer, traffic operations. So he works with all the signal systems and the timing of the signals and things that we do there. I've also brought some of the sheriff, Lieutenant Gary Mark, if you can kind of raise your hand wherever you are, Sheriff. I hope he's not too far in the back. He's here, we will call him up, he's by the door. That makes me feel good. Then we have Chief Jamie Cunningham from North Naples Fire District, North Collier Fire District, I always get that right. He's counting heads because the room can only hold so much, and it gets too busy, and make us cut down the space. But I want to echo what the representatives have said. We reviewed the project and made some recommendations. We understand some of the concerns. At the second part of the presentation, Scott will take you through some of the things that are happening with roadway transportation planning and some ideas where we might be able to take a few things to the board that might help you. Ultimately, that will require board approval. Might not lessen all the burden, but it might offset some of it as well too. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation with Mr. Strain, and please hold your questions to the very end, and then we'll come up and we'll work with him.
Thank you, Nick. Good evening, everyone, and I'm going to stand next pretty close to the screen. This is a new presentation for me. Some of you I know prior to the meeting started, I've seen other presentations I've done. I was asked specifically, as Nick stated, to look at and focus on several subjects that are relative to your community. So with that, Heritage Bay is a planned unit development. It is one community, even though I know within your Heritage Bay planned unit development, you have numerous communities involving Quarry and another one called Heritage Bay. And you have a commercial activity center. I'll show you how those all evolved. And I'll also try to show you how they weighed in when we came into the zoning action back in 2003. I was appointed to the Planning Commission at 9/11/01 in the morning before the towers were hit. I've been on the Planning Commission since then. There's nobody on the Planning Commission who has been there since that time as well. So I am the only one left. I hope this is, I went back and looked at the records from those days. I pulled old files. I put a lot of information to try to explain what we're going to be talking about for a little while tonight. First of all, establishment of the zoning, and this has to go through the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, which is the board that I'm chairman of. I've been chairman on that board for 15 years now. And then it also has to go to the Board of County Commissioners. The Planning Commission recommends to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners, the commission that Bert Saunders is on, is the final decision maker. On this particular project, we had 4 items to discuss at our levels. One was the development of regional impact, DRI. Government is big on acronyms, so I'm trying to give them to you here so I haven't got to spell it out through the whole program. But the development of regional impact is a state level issue, and Thaddeus Cohen's department up in DCA up in Tallahassee actually dealt with these in days past. The second level is the planned unit development. That's the program that put this together as one large zoned area with multiple communities like you have inside of it, but it is one zoned area of planned unit development. And out of that came a developer's contribution agreement. Now that's the agreement that established the ability to move forward with your traffic issues. Your roads, your connections, your lights, distances, all that little techie stuff that gets in there about how to build a development and make it consistent with our levels of service. The last thing is the PUDA, that's the Planned Unit Development Amendment. That occurred in 2010. I was on the board when that happened as well. And it didn't change much. You'll see it affected the activity center a little, but it's the first time that on a plan that went through a public process that the road, is it Lime Rock Road or Limestone Road, showed up, and I'll show you how that came about. And as I wrap it up, we'll talk about Immokalee Road and Heritage Bay, where the entrances are, how that's working together. And then lastly, there's some upcoming and ongoing road projects that will relieve some of the traffic you're experiencing. And that, by the way, I just live a mile or two from here, so I'm experiencing it too. I'm just going to touch those from the 10,000 level, 10,000 foot level, because that's all my board normally does. Trinity Scott's here to get into the neat details on those, and she'll have a lot more graphics to show you those. First of all, the future land use map. This is very important. This is the map that designates what's happening in Cuyahoga County. Now, I've had calls from some of the people and residents of this area. I don't know if it's any of you in particular. And some of them said, well, how can you put activity center right there next to our residential homes? Well, this plan was the result of a comprehensive planning amendment, a plan that developed back in the late 80s, and that red square was one of the activity centers designated at that time. Your project came well after that designation. That activity center has been there for a long period of time. That's your Heritage Bay project. Now that square is overlapping what is now called another rural fringe mixed use district right here. And there's a reason why the developer took that square as one piece. And as we get into development, or the data here, I'll show you why. For them, it was beneficial to do that. Also, right around that activity center is that black circle. That's a residential high-density band. That was something the developer needed. He needed it into his project, and he used it. And we'll explain how that fit into your overall program. Now, one of the items that we look at for these mixed-use activity centers, which is what that square is called, is that all the abutting projects, whether commercial or residential, need to be interconnected. And that's the piece that involves the Limestone Road or Limestone Trail and a couple of the other connections that are going to it. In the 2004 aerial, this is Heritage Bay. Now, this was the old mule pen quarry, we used to call it. I've been here for 41 years now. And I was a volunteer firefighter for 10 years before the fire departments were unionized. And I would get calls, and I'd be out with the crews, and we'd get strange fires up here because lightning would strike the fences that went around on these road lines, and they're barbed wire fences. And everywhere that lightning struck the fence, and the fence struck a tree or something, would be a fire. So we had a heck of a time putting fires out up here. But I remember this from the old days. I spent a lot of time out here under circumstances I wish I wasn't here for. Now, in 2017, a lot's changed. This is now the same mule pen quarry, but it's subdivided up into the various places you all live. And I guess, from what I understand, you've got two separate communities here now, and then this is the activity center down here. Those are a couple of the road systems that interact around the activity center, and this is the Limestone Trail that we're going to be talking a bit about. You got gatehouses, if you got gatehouses at those two locations with a planned light or a loud light up at that location. Staff report from the Planning Commission in 2003. This is what we based the wholesome approach to this particular project on. Clearly, the zoning of the subject site to a PDI-DRI is preferable to its development in independent, piecemeal fashion where traffic circulation design would be haphazard and less compatible. Now that's important. That's why this was looked at as one big project. That's why the roads were required to be connected to the activity center, so you all would not have to go out into the major thoroughfares and further congest them. You could do it all internally. The PUD, and when it came along after the 729, right after the Planning Commission meeting, was approved, and they were consistent with the various standards, one of which was that they'd have a lot of internal capture. Vehicles would be moving around inside your project between the recreational, the commercial, and all the accesses to the activity center, as part of which we're trying to make sure it adheres to right now. The density was a big issue for the developer. The density is, this whole property was considered area for one density. The reason that's important is 65% of the density used for Heritage Bay came from that activity center density band. Without that activity center being spread out through your whole project, your density would have been a little bit harder to attain than being able to use something that was allowed to be spread from that density band. This is the site plan, the master plan that was attached to the PUD ordinance in 2003. Those are the roads at the time that connected to this activity center right down here. Of course, this is Bel Air. Those roads, theoretically, were going to have gatehouses in 3 locations entering your community. It still allowed internal access, but you could go back and forth through the gatehouses or gate bars or whatever else you would have had here to get in and out of the community. And again, the light was figured for that main entrance over there. Another light at the time was figured for this location. And it's in the DO, and I'm going to show you a development order that has that in it. Problem is that road got moved. And there's a very strict rule within our PUD, development order, and other documents that require a distance from the intersection of 951 and Immokalee Road out to where you can have your very first light. And the movement of that Bel Air Drive caused a problem for that distance. And I'll show you how that came about. It happened in 2004. BCC meeting, Board of County Commissioners. The representative for the developer was asked about the activity center. He says the project also features internal access to the activity center so the residents of Heritage Bay will not have to travel out on Immokalee Road to shop for their everyday needs. Likewise, between the county manager at the time was Jim Mudd and Mr. Anderson, their representative. He spoke and said basically all the traffic lights are going to be far enough away from the intersection not to cause any problems. They were assured of that. This is the plan that came out in 2004. It's part of what's the Recorded Developer Contribution Agreement, the DCA. Now look what happened down here. The area changed a little bit. This road still was internal to your site, as were these. Theoretically, you'd still have 3 gatehouses if this road ended up being inside this other gatehouse, and you still had a light shown, considered throughout that location. And the light was also still considered at that time for that location. The PUD ordinance in 2010, this is just to show you what happened with the amendment. Basically, the amendment was supposed to be very limited. It was limited to changing this area right here to, I believe, residential from all commercial. And at the same time, this is the first time on a plan that Limestone Trail showed up as a connection over to your main road. So that's how it happened, but remember where this location of Bel Air is shown in this particular plan and how the plans in the previous area. And I'll show you a close-up on those when we get into it a little bit further. This is the PUD ordinance in 2010. This is the master plan again. These are the roads that came about. But look at the way the Limestone Trail connects now. It's outside your gatehouse. Thus, there isn't a need for a gatehouse at this location. So that reduced the number of gatehouses you have down to 2, and this became outside the gatehouse here, which is allowing the interconnection of both inside and the public over to Bel Air Drive. There's a reason for that. It may not seem apparent. Well, in fact, it wasn't apparent, and I had to do some digging to find out the reason why. We'll get to it in just a minute. A little blow up of that corner. There's your same scenario. And this is Bel Air Drive. This is the piece that's going to be most important to understand how the light operations have to go out there. In 7/29/2003, in the transportation section of the plan unit development, it says you cannot have a full median opening, which means a light, any closer than a half mile from the intersection of the roadways of intersection 951, which is now Collier Boulevard, and Immokalee Road. That was passed as part of the zoning. That's what we saw when I reviewed it back then. Your concerns and things that are happening to you now weren't something that we were known. Limestone Trail was not, the location was when this was put in place. The DCA in 7/27/24 basically said the same thing, half a mile from the intersection of those 2 roadways. So if you take a half a mile, it's 2,640. The distance to Bel Air Drive to the center line is about 2,500 feet. Just 140 feet shy of that distance to be able to qualify for the inside. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to let me get to the reason why that occurred. Okay? It had nothing to do with Collier County. What it had to do with was a court order, and I'll show that to you. This is a pattern that's going to have the future landings and the overpass that's going to go in. We've already moved the canals for this. Yes, there's an overpass going in at 951, which is Collier Boulevard and Immokalee Road. I've got a little bit of a blow of that. I'll show you as we get into it. Here's our orientation. This is where that road would come out. The overpass and embankment is still there. I'll show you another diagram how that tapers off. From transportation section of development order, the level of service. This is something that Collier County has an option to look at every time there's changes to the development. Other improvements deemed necessary by Collier County to maintain the adopted level of service on the impacted intersections. And these are some of the intersections that were in that report. Look what's interesting. At Bel Air Drive, they could have a signal at Warren, meaning if once the traffic said you could have a signal there, the plan unit development and the development order allowed that to happen. Another transportation section. Now this is the developer has these documents. He knows he can do a signal. He knows he can do it within a half mile. So why would he plan not to put Bel Air within a half mile as it was shown in the documents I showed you earlier? He had a good reason to. It's a little bit of blow up of this particular overpass landing right here just to show you how that fits out. That light location is important. I'll show you why. That light location is where the road was supposed to come out. In the diagrams I showed you earlier, that's where it was supposed to happen. There it is there. There it is there. And this is the way it came out. You notice the difference? There's 2,500 feet. There's where the road should have came out. About 160-foot difference. Now, why would a developer move a road over 160 feet when he knows he's going to have a violation of the zoning document, which is law? when he could have put it right where he showed it on his plan. I'll show you in just a minute, we'll get to it. There's your calculations, right? So if you get the 160 feet, if it hadn't been moved back, you would have been within the half mile. In 2004, the engineer for the developer had submitted this response to county comments. One of the county comments was, Bel Air Drive entrance will not be at the location shown on plans. Per court order, the driveway in the immediate opening at Ferguson's Golf will be located, and it had to line up with Ferguson's Golf entry. At the time, it was just a golf shop. So I went and tried to find out what cases Ferguson Golf was involved in so I could get a copy of it. I did. This is a copy of the case. The order of taking, it had to do with the taking of the right of some of Ferguson's property. They could not extend, they could not go past station 231. So what's that mean? It means to me, it's like a map to find out where 231 is. These are the as-built drawings from Ockley Road. Station 231, and you can't see it on your plan, but this is where the location was starting for that other intersection where Bel Air could have came out. Unfortunately, this is where Ferguson's entry had to be because they couldn't expand it to a point where it would get past that number. Now, that's the original alignment, and the new alignment had to be lined up. For you guys, that means your alignment got moved over to line up with this one. As a result, you have a shortage of about 160 feet in the ordinance that requires you to be half a mile from the intersection. That's strictly an issue in the ordinance. It says it there, that's the way we have to interpret it.
I'll talk real loud. Tell me one thing. When Mark pointed that out to you, it said at warrant, and that's important because by state law, they just can't put a signal up. It has to be traffic warrants. The gentleman to my right here, Tony Kawaj, is a professional engineer in the state of Florida. If I was to bring the Florida Department of Transportation, they would say the same thing. A traffic signal cannot be artificially put up. It has to be the traffic signal warrants. If they sign and seal a traffic signal without it being warrants, and an accident happens, the community and the engineer is liable. And I'll talk a little later when Trinity comes up about why we pushed the signal to Woodcrest, why that was the preferred alternative that you saw in the national plans that had the traffic signal all the time. I'll explain it a little bit. It's important that Mark tells you, and I tell you, that a warrant study has to be done at the primary location first, and then the secondary second. And the primary location is the main entrance that was here. So we'll walk through that a little bit later.
Thank you. A responsibility for the PUD. Nick also asked me to show you a language change that occurred between the PUD times in 2003, in which maintenance and other issue responsibilities were, this is about the only reference to how HOAs had to operate within a PUD or CDDs, and basically allowed multiple associations to address the issues to the county from within the PUD. That changed about 2 or 3 years ago, and today, one entity has to take the responsibility of reporting and then acknowledging the commitments made by the PUD from the previous owner to the new owner. So that has changed. Yours is before the change, many years before the change, and this is the new language this year. It's not going to help you, but he wanted me to make sure that you were aware that we had corrected that issue. Other road improvements, this is a general 10,000 overview. On Mockley Road, you know what we've done? We've moved this canal. We moved it because the touchdown points for the overpass need to be created. We did them now. We did the intersection improvements so we can develop that intersection to what it is today. The overpasses that we're looking at just on a Mockley Road, we've got one going in at Randall and Mockley way out here, an east-west connection. And another one, there's actually 2 others in Collier County, but they're not near you, so I took them off. The one by you is this one right here. It'll go east-west up over Collier Boulevard. And when it gets done, it'll hopefully look something like the one we have at Airport Road and Woodgate Parkway. Now, the touchdown points that you're seeing are these hills that are along both sides of these ramps. That's the problem, getting your intersection pushed back far enough to accommodate that height. On a long-range plan of some of the other things that will relieve traffic in both the Mockley Road and other parts of the county, we've got extensions on Logan, and then another one is on the needs assessment for 951 extension, finally up to Lee County line. That one is not funded, so it's a long ways off. We have Vanderbilt Beach Road extension in 2 different phases, going out east and going towards the east to the rural land stewardship area out here. We have Benfield Corridor. Benfield Corridor is a parallel road to 951. It's going to connect down to 41, go up here through Wilson, and then take people back up to Mockley Road. So that means people coming from the east could go down Wilson to get another alternative access before coming all the way to Collier Boulevard. The Tree Farm Road is another phase. I know Trinity's got more detail on it than this. This is just one piece. That one's being worked on right now, and she'll give you dates on that. The Logan connections to Lee County should be completed, if not already, by the end of this year. And the Skyler Boulevard extension, timeframe's unknown because it's just on the needs plan, it's not been funded. But Lee County is supposed to, by the end of 2019, connect this up to Mega Beach Road. Hopefully they will. That'll give us another north-south link. Middle Beach Road extension. The plan started out to take us out to 8th Street. Now it's going, I guess, to 16th Street. I just found out. So it's going a little farther than we anticipated. That's good. And eventually, it'll take that last section out to hopefully a north-south link right here. That'll pull a lot of people out in this area. If they want to get access southwards, they'll be able to go here. Hopefully, this link will someday connect to an new interstate exchange way down south. But this is in the long-range plan. We don't have the funding for it right now. Or I think you may have some update on that in yours. That takes us to the end of my part of the presentation. The rest is going to be Trinity's. As I said, it's one zoning plan with multiple communities.
They're going to take a moment to switch the presentations. So first I want to give Mark a round of applause. He didn't have to come in. He's really separate and distinct from the organization that I manage. He works directly for the board. But I thought it was important that Mark came in because he has the history. This gentleman was along when all the zoning applications were approved. And that was the struggle when I met with your leadership and not the folks, get it wrong, I guess, the Heritage Bay side of the house. We always envisioned or understood this project to be one project. When you folks buy into a community, even within your community of Port Heritage Bay, there are sub-communities, sub-HOAs. From the county's perspective, that has always been a challenge, that when a major project gets approved, it gets fragmented. And then one of the slides Mark showed you is something we changed because the developer leads, the management team from the HOAs are stuck trying to figure out the pieces and the reporting requirements. So one of the recommendations we have, even for tonight, is that you form a master association to deal with your master problems, your master concerns. Because trying to deal with this from the commercial owner's perspective, from the Heritage Bay, from the quarry separately, doesn't do you well when you're trying to figure out some of the global issues that are here. All the new developments that are similar to yours that are approved have one master association that deals with these issues. You don't have that. You have one that handles kind of your permitting issues with the CED and some other things. So that's one of the recommendations we're going to have for you tonight. Good to go?
Good evening. I brought my notes up because I do have some stats in my notes, just in case we get into those. My name is Trinity Scott. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager. Been in Collier County since 1996. And worked on and off with the county and the state for the last 15 years in transportation planning. So I know a lot about the area and some of the history on some of these projects. And I'm going to go over a lot of projects that are happening or are in the planning process around this area to try to alleviate some of the congestion that we're experiencing. So each year, I am tasked, myself and my taskers are tasked with looking at the level of service operations of all of our collector and arterial roadways.